Let me tell you my story. My name is Franklin Tesla. I was born on March 12th, 2075 AD in London, United Kingdom. My father's side of the family were somehow the distant descendants of Nikola Tesla who've held on to his surname. After all, Nikola Tesla is one of the most important people in history who modernized humanity, along with Michael Faraday earlier, who is credited for inventing the engine and generator, among many other things. I was fascinated by my great ancestor and inspired by him as well, ever since I could remember. One of my very first memories was of my father telling me about Nikola Tesla, how he revolutionized technology and brought us into the modern age due to his patent for alternating current electricity, which is still the standard today. I guess my father thought it was funny to give me the name Franklin, like the famous inventor Benjamin Franklin, who was also one of United States of America's founding fathers. I don't think that my name harmed me in too much of a significant way. Ever since childhood, I have loved science. However, up until high school, I was bullied. Those years passed very quickly as I went through my formal schooling far quicker than my peers and was always the youngest among the students. I loved science very early on in my life and decided for it to be my life's passion, to once again help humanity the way my ancestor Nikola Tesla has done with many inventions which have revolutionized the world. I was always the best student in any science class I was in. However, my one weakness was in art and more specifically drawing. I couldn't draw a perfect stick figure, even if my life depended on it. By 19 years of age, I had a PhD in theoretical physics from Oxford University, as well as managed to get several different bachelor degrees in the process by taking tests after reading books on chemistry, engineering, biology, computer sciences, mathematics, and really any scientific or research material that I could find. At 23 years old, I was hired by the old JP Morgan company to do an extensive study in game theory models. When I completed the task I was then nominated for a Nobel Prize in economics. And guess what? I actually got it. I was now not a joke of two great inventors into one, but the real deal. I was a household name around the world as Sir Franklin Tesla, after getting knighted in England by the Queen herself. I was now world famous and rich, so I started my own invention company laboratory. One of my favorite films as a child was an old classic film called Back to the Future, which had three parts to it, starring classic actors such as Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. Ever since I saw this movie, I have been fascinated with the idea of time travel. So, in my lab, one of the secret projects I have been working on was creating a time machine, something which was thought to be impossible ever since the beginning of time. It was experimented with in the early 2050s. But all experiments turned out to be catastrophic. It was widely known that the wormholes which were created did not go all the way to the time that the traveler was meant to go. Each time the traveler got stuck in the space in between time, which was inside a wormhole and in another dimension. It kept those failed experiments in mind because every failed experiment is one step closer to success as it only brings you closer to your goal. I, of course, could not draw to save my own life. So I helped one homeless artist out who I saw was drawing with chalk on a sidewalk. The drawings were simply incredible, and crowds of people were standing around to see the drawings which he was making. They were Renaissance in style with spinning torsos and dynamic classical expressions reminiscent of my favorite artist, Michelangelo Buonarroti. His name was Maxim Ivanov. I took him in and gave him a job at my lab as my personal assistant. Turns out Maxim Ivanov was not a failed artist. He was on his way up in the art world but started using drugs, got in a binge, and ended up on the street. I knew Maxim had a thing for my wife Ophelia, but I let it go because I always felt that he was a good person. I made Maxim the chief executive officer of my invention company fairly quickly, and he was my personal assistant as well as the main designer. Maxim was the only person I told this time machine project idea to, and we worked on it together. I would work out all the calculations as well as the science, and he would draw out the ideas as well as design them later on a computer. I knew errors from previous experiments in the early 2050s, so due to this aspect, I have done experiments with lab rats. After we built the time machine, we set it up for an experiment. I put a rat inside the time machine with a detector technology microchip and sent it back in time. We could not retrieve the first specimen after the time machine arrived back to us. We then decided to send in something a little smarter and larger than a rat, which was a dog. When we sent the dog to the same time we sent in the rat, the dog came back with a dead rat in its mouth. We automatically knew that our time machine worked properly after this result. I imagined all of the things I could do with a time machine, like prevent wars and genocides from happening. But every time I think about it, the paradox in this situation is, had I changed the outcome before it occurred, there might have been more catastrophic events which would have taken place instead. Sometimes humans learn from historical events and would like to have the power to improve the past for a better future. In regard to this necessity, as technology has evolved exponentially throughout history, we have come closer to solving world hunger, diseases, and other problems. One theory on the paradox of time travel is that if you change something in the past, it may cause a chain reaction affecting the future you left. Regardless of how small this change is, the impact on human interaction postulated by quantum physics theory, with layers of dimensions going all the way up until the 10th dimension, might be huge. This was all an untested theory. I did not know how my actions might change the timeline, but I had to try. I heard Maxim say right after our experiment, "Hey Franklin, let's try this thing out ourselves. I know you always wanted to see real life dinosaurs." Maxim knew my weakness. Ever since childhood, I had dinosaur mini quantum robots, which would act like real dinosaurs in reasonable and safe standards for kids to play with, except they were from new bionic soft materials that resembled flesh in their texture. These toys were on my work desk where anyone could see them. After hearing the CEO of my company and my close friend Maxim say this to me, in a heartbeat, I impulsively responded, "Yes, let's try this thing out." I always wanted to know what dinosaurs really looked like. Our time machine had the capability of traveling, not only through time, but to geographic location space, based on where it was programmed to go, sort of like teleportation with time travel capability. We got into the time machine, locked ourselves in, and prepared for a 10-second countdown to wormhole penetration to another point in space-time 67 million years back in time. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Within a millisecond, we were in a totally different world. And we stepped outside the time machine. Both Maxim and I were astounded at what we saw. We were in the Cretaceous period along with actual dinosaurs. We saw Triceratops in the distance with her young chicks. She looked distressed and was with three hatchlings. Then suddenly we witnessed something absolutely phenomenal. A huge Tyrannosaurus jumped out of the bushes and prepared to attack the mother Triceratops. As this occurred, I saw Maxim running back to the time machine, screaming, "Sorry, buddy boy, but I will have to leave you here now. See you in 67 million years as a fossil. That's if you're lucky." I screamed, "You ungrateful, selfish jerk. I curse you." As I finished screaming, he disappeared, and I was left alone 67 million years back in time. Now my focus was purely on survival, but I turned back to see the epic battle between a Tyrannosaurus and a Triceratops, mother defending her young chicks. I saw that the Tyrannosaurus was a bit hesitant to strike as the Triceratops' mother was in the guard post protecting her three chicks. The Tyrannosaurus then jumped up towards the mother Triceratops, but she stood her ground. It was only a bluff. What it did was, just as it seemed the predator may have anticipated, it scared two of the hatchlings away into dangerous territory for the Tyrannosaurus to get closer to them. As soon as the chicks got out of their mother's protection, the Tyrannosaurus stepped on one chick, killing it instantly, and tore into the other hatchling with its deadly jaws. The mother Triceratops seemed to be frantic after she saw two of her babies killed by this ruthless predator and charged at him with the remaining chick behind her left helpless by itself. Tyrannosaurus had an amazingly quick reaction time. As soon as she got close enough to almost strike, the predator caught her by her neck, and with a loud scream, it was all over, with the predator instantly eating its prey after the kill. I ran to the remaining Triceratops chick and hid it with me behind the bushes as I was watching the huge male Tyrannosaurus eat this poor hatchling's mother. The young Triceratops was about the size of a large Mastiff dog and hard to move in the direction you wanted it to due to weighing over 250 pounds. Many troubling thoughts have passed through my mind at the time, like this spiteful scoundrel Maxim, whom I made the CEO of my company. But it wasn't enough for him. He wanted everything, including my company, my wife, and he wanted me dead. But what he did not realize was that the blueprints of the time machine were fresh in my mind, as I have photographic memory. The next morning, I woke up next to the young Triceratops, In fact, it was more like an early morning shower with the hatchling peeing on my head. I jumped up and shouted, shoot, what the? Why? Where? What happened? Where am I? At this moment, I was hoping that this was just a bad dream, but this was reality. I was stuck back in time, 67 million years ago from where I came from. I sat around, looked at the Triceratops chick who was eating grass by me, and decided to call her Ophelia after my wife's name. I meditated and realized that I do have a plan to try to fix this. After all, I am the one who invented the time machine. Gathering all the materials needed and creating tools from absolute scratch would require me to work at least 15 hours a day gathering food as well as essential materials to make my own lab to recreate this time machine from the sources around me. I calculated that with working every day, dedicating 15 hours each day, with no breaks, it would take me about 45 years to recreate the time machine. And that's if I was lucky to gather all the materials needed. My lab would be in a cave on top of a hill where nothing lived, and nothing could reach me for my own safety. Ophelia would just be around the area in the valley where I would see her every day. I didn't have many problems staying out of the way of large predatory dinosaurs, as I was significantly much smaller. I would mostly not be noticed, as I also knew that in case a large carnivorous dinosaur was in the area, I would have to hide and be still to avoid being spotted. I read this in a paleontological study a while back that dinosaurs mostly detect movement. Good thing I was a vegetarian back at home, so it wasn't too hard to adapt to all the vegetation and possible eggs that I could find. I limited my intake of dinosaur eggs because I wanted to have the least amount of impact on the distant future with my actions. As the years went on, I was closer to my goal. I first created simple tools from scratch, such as the wheel, hammer, and so on, from which I eventually was able to harness the first electrical tool. This was pure dedication for me. All this time, I could only think about Maxim with my wife, in my house, and owning my company. There is no way I would allow this. I now rode Ophelia on her back. She grew up to be a big Triceratops and was a faithful companion the whole time I've known her. Dinosaurs were kind of at a similar intelligence level as dogs or horses. When Ophelia died 25 years subsequent to my arrival, due to getting stuck and drowning in a swamp, I unfortunately couldn't help her get out because of her massive size. 30 years passed and I was 55 years old, still working on my goal and still around 15 years away from technically being possible to recreate my own time machine. Now I was all alone, thinking about both my late pet companion Triceratops and my wife Ophelia, 67 million years into the future. I was still stuck back in prehistoric time, lonely, with only my own thoughts and revenge on my 15 years passed like the wind with me, just concentrating on everything that had to get done. I was now 70 years old, but I was full of energy living in an atmospherically clean world, breathing fresh air, eating fresh vegetation, and working hard every day. I finally achieved my goal and recreated my time machine from the materials, which I gathered as well as processed throughout the 45 years I've been stuck in the Cretaceous period. I calculated the exact second when Maxim left me and then put the time machine to travel to that time. I engineered this new time machine for single use on purpose so Maxim couldn't possibly utilize it. I stepped into the new time machine and scheduled it to travel to the precise time Maxim left me 45 years back. Within a millisecond, I was there. As I saw Maxim running and yelling those things I heard him say 45 years ago, he suddenly stopped and saw an old man with a long beard. Maxim was shocked and baffled to see the 70-year-old me blocking his path to the initial time machine. With a handcrafted gun, I shot him in the leg before he could get back to the first time machine. Maxim fell and screamed due to the pain he was in. I said hello again before you get a chance to leave me here. Through sheer willpower, I managed to outdo you as a better man. Since when did you think you were smarter than me? As I said this to Maxim, I saw the 25-year-old me running to the original time machine I built 45 years ago and leave back to the future. That's as far as I could remember about this incident. The space-time continuum automatically changed. Next thing I recall, I woke up in the morning next to my wife Ophelia. She was still sleeping and I didn't want to wake her up. I kissed her on the cheek lightly as I really missed her. The 45 years I was stuck in the Cretaceous period. It all seemed like a bad dream which lasted a lifetime. I was curious, so I went over to my secret compartment in my laboratory and saw that my time machine was where it always was since I started working on it. Nothing changed in my current timeline. The time machine was still there. However, one person was missing. It was Maxim. I thought about all that had happened to me. I was back to being 25 years old again, like none of this had ever occurred. It seemed to me like an entire lifetime had passed with much wisdom gained, and now I have another lifetime ahead of me. I decided it's best to destroy the time machine, for nobody to get a hold of it and use it for their selfish goals. After all, human nature is flawed and not everyone has good intentions. The world's problems still needed to be solved, and that's what I wanted to continue doing. I learned that humans generally want godlike powers until they reach them and may realize that they are too much to handle, that they don't need this kind of control as well as responsibility. At least that's how I felt about it. In reality, nobody should have this kind of world altering powers, owning a time machine, not even myself as well. And for a good reason. Although with this experience, I proved to myself that through sheer will and determination, anything is possible in life.